All right, so we are officially on shutdown watch. The clock is ticking down in Washington, the headlines are everywhere, and government funding is about to run dry. But what's the real fight here? It's not just about a line in a budget. Nope. Let's dig into what's really at stake.
So, here we are, September 30th, 2025, and the government shutdown looks pretty much inevitable. Seriously, at the stroke of midnight, the money runs out for federal agencies, and if there's no deal, a lot of the government just stops.
Okay, so what even is a government shutdown anyway? Well, in the simplest terms, it's what happens when Congress can't agree on a budget to keep the lights on. The result? All the non-essential services shut down. Federal workers either get sent home, that's called a furlough, or, believe it or not, they have to work without getting paid.
But here's the thing. This isn't your standard squabble over spending. No. The real sticking point, the thing that's got everyone at a complete standstill, is actually way more specific, and it's something that hits millions of American families right where they live.
It all comes down to healthcare. That's the real fight. We're talking about the tax credits from the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. These credits are what make insurance affordable for a lot of people, and they're about to expire. Democrats are saying, hey, we have to extend these now in this funding bill, but Republicans are saying, hold on, let's deal with that separately down the road.
And this number, this is why it's a full-blown crisis, 65%. Just let that sink in. In some states, that's how much your health insurance premiums could shoot up without these tax credits. I mean, that's not just a little price bump. That's a massive leap that could make healthcare completely unaffordable for millions.
Just imagine for a second what that means for a typical family budget. Right now, with the tax credits, your health insurance is probably a bill you can manage, but without them, that same bill could just explode. And then you're stuck making these impossible choices. Like, do we go to the doctor or do we buy groceries this week?
And here's the real kicker. The timing of all this is absolutely critical. This isn't some far-off problem for next year. It is happening right now. Notices about these massive price hikes, they're going out in October, and open enrollment for new healthcare plans starts November 1st. So you can see why Democrats are treating this like a five-alarm fire that needs to be put out immediately.
So, you can bet that with stakes this high, the political blame game is in overdrive. Let's take a look at how each side is spinning this, shall we?
Okay, so on the Republican side, you've got folks like Congressman Mike Lawler, and his take is pretty clear. Democrats are the ones to blame. He's saying they're essentially holding the entire government hostage just to push through their own policy agenda. So what's the Republican solution? They want to pass what's called a clean funding bill. That just means a simple, temporary bill to keep the government open, with no strings attached. Then, they say, we can sit down and negotiate the healthcare stuff separately.
But then you flip over to the Democratic side, and, well, they see it completely differently. Someone like Congresswoman Susan DelBene would argue that no, it's the Republicans who are being irresponsible. They're saying the GOP is just ignoring this massive healthcare crisis that's about to hit. The Democratic view is that Republicans aren't even in town to negotiate and that they're failing to protect people from these insane price hikes.
So you can see the fundamental disagreement right there. Republicans say Democrats are holding funding hostage. Democrats say Republicans are ignoring a healthcare crisis. Their solutions are polar opposites, and that, my friends, is why we're stuck in this massive gridlock.
Okay, but this political food fight in D.C. doesn't just stay in D.C., right? A shutdown has very real, very tangible consequences that ripple out across the whole country. And the effects are felt almost immediately, and they're all over the place. You've got the huge human cost for federal workers, for one. Then there's the potential for economic chaos when key financial data gets delayed. And just deep uncertainty for everyone, from our military families to people who really depend on the social safety net.
And if you want to put a number on that human cost, it's 750,000. That's how many federal workers could be furloughed, sent home, without pay. We're talking about 750,000 families suddenly thrown into total financial chaos with no idea when it's going to end.
But wait, it gets even more complicated. Being sent home isn't the only thing that happens. A majority of federal workers, we're talking over 60%, are considered essential. So think about your air traffic controllers or border patrol agents. They have to show up to work. They have to keep doing their jobs, but they won't see a paycheck until this whole thing is over.
And here's another one of those ripple effects that you might not think about, but it's a big deal. A shutdown means key economic reports, like the monthly jobs report, don't get released. Why does that matter to you? Well, it forces the Federal Reserve to make huge decisions about interest rates.
the rates that affect your mortgage, your car loan, your credit cards, and they have to do it without all the facts. They're basically flying blind.
So what's next? Where do we go from here? Honestly, as we get closer to that deadline, the path to getting the government back open looks messy. It's going to be complicated, it's going to be ugly, and there's definitely no easy way out of this.
So here's how this is probably going to play out. First, midnight hits, and boom, the shutdown starts. Then you're going to see both sides put their own funding bills up for a vote. And, you guessed it, both are pretty much guaranteed to fail. After that, we might see Republicans force a vote on their bill every single day just to apply political pressure. At the end of the day, it just becomes a painful waiting game, waiting to see who can withstand the pain of the shutdown the longest.
And this really gets to the core of why this is so hard to solve. To get a deal done, you need negotiation, you need compromise, you need at least a little bit of trust. But as one person close to the situation said, right now there's no good faith and all bad blood. When that's the starting point, a real compromise feels, well, almost impossible.
So, it all comes down to this one final question. As hundreds of thousands of workers miss their paychecks, as the economy starts to feel the squeeze, the pressure is just going to keep building and building. In a game of political chicken this big, with absolutely no trust between the two sides, who is going to blink first?